Okay, let's unpack this. When we think about the search for life in the universe, our minds often jump to distant exoplanets, carbon-based organisms, maybe little green people. We scan the stars, build massive telescopes, hoping to catch a whisper of something familiar out there.
Right. Looking for mirrors of ourselves, basically.
Exactly. But what if we've been looking in all the wrong places or perhaps in the wrong states of matter entirely? What if the aliens aren't light years away, nestled on a far-off world, but right here, co-inhabitants of Earth, sharing our very planet, just in a form we haven't even begun to truly consider?
That's a profound reorientation of our perspective. What's fascinating here is how much our search for life is naturally constrained by our own familiar biology. We are, after all, carbon-based creatures who thrive in liquid water within a relatively narrow temperature range. It's perfectly logical that when we scan the cosmos, we look for those same conditions. We're essentially looking for cosmic reflections of ourselves. But this deep dive asks us to cast a much wider Darwinian net to challenge that inherent bias and consider life in entirely different states of matter, specifically plasma.
Plasma, the fourth state of matter.
Precisely. Our current astrobiology, while incredibly important in yielding remarkable discoveries, is still, in a way, wearing blinkers. We're looking at a mere fraction of the ordinary matter in the universe, focusing almost exclusively on carbon-based life and astonishingly completely overlooking the other 85% of the universe that is hypothesized to be dark matter, which could also potentially host life.
So our mission today is a radical reevaluation of what life can truly be. We're diving into a theoretical framework that proposes plasma-based life forms, existing not just in ordinary matter, the stuff we can see and touch,
Right, the familiar stuff.
but also in hypothesized dark matter biospheres. And the truly mind-bending part, these potential life forms could be right here in our own backyard, existing all around and even interpenetrating our very world, unnoticed by our conventional senses.
It's a staggering thought. You're going to hear about concepts like plasma DNA, the idea of laboratory-created plasma cells that exhibit shockingly lifelike behaviors, and even the startling possibility of what could be described as telepathic communication between these potential entities. It's a journey that truly stretches the imagination and challenges our most fundamental assumptions about existence.
Our core source material for this deep dive is Jay Alfred's groundbreaking paper, Earth's Plasma Biospheres, published on August 10th, 2025. This paper provides the theoretical backbone, but it's important to understand that it draws upon and is supported by a wealth of established scientific papers, experimental findings, and influential books from fields like plasma physics, astrobiology, and even philosophy of science.
So it's not just one person's idea out of the blue.
Not at all. It's crucial to remember that while this framework is theoretical, it's built on rigorous scientific observation and modeling, pushing the boundaries of what we understand about life in the universe. It's speculative, yes, but grounded speculation. Okay, so if we're going to talk about plasma life, we need to first establish a compelling case for it. That means redefining some biological fundamentals, and surprisingly, the very idea of plasma being connected to life has deep, fascinating roots in scientific history.
Absolutely. One of the most compelling early insights comes from theoretical physicist David Bohm, who famously worked closely with Albert Einstein. Bohm was truly astonished by what he observed when studying electrons in a non-neutral plasma state.
What did he see?
He found that they stopped behaving like individual independent particles. Instead, they acted as if they were part of a larger and interconnected whole. Imagine a swarm of bees or a school of fish. While each individual moves, their collective behavior creates a coherent, organized pattern. That's what Bohm saw.
Wow.
Despite individual electron movements appearing random, the collective behavior of vast numbers of electrons produced surprisingly well-organized, almost organic effects.
So not just a chaotic soup, but a highly structured, organized system. What did he mean by that?
Precisely. Bohm noted that the plasma constantly regenerated itself, maintaining its structure even as individual particles moved through it. What really struck him was its ability to enclose impurities within a wall, almost like—
What an amoeba.
Exactly, like a unicellular amoeba encasing a foreign substance to protect itself. He was so struck by these self-organizing, self-maintaining, and almost protective qualities that he later remarked he frequently had the impression the electron sea was alive and that plasma possessed some traits of living things.
That's incredible from someone like Bohm.
It was a profound observation that blurred the lines between inert matter and nascent biological systems.
And it's not just Bohm's observation that hints at this connection. Even the name plasma itself has a biological origin. thanks to Nobel Prize winner Irving Langmuir.
That's right. Langmuir, who won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1932 for his work on surface chemistry, coined the term plasma around 1927, specifically because it reminded him of blood plasma.
Blood plasma, the liquid part of blood.
Exactly. In biology, blood plasma is the fluid component of blood that carries cells and nutrients throughout the body. So the very term itself, chosen by a pioneering scientist in the field, carries this historical and almost intuitive mental connection of electrical plasma to living systems right from its genesis.
Okay, fascinating historical context. Moving beyond that, let's look at the core properties of plasma and how they might mimic life's fundamental structures and functions. It's quite uncanny how similar some of these phenomena are to what we see in our own biological cells.
Indeed. Plasma physicist Mitsuo Uehara and his colleagues, in a 2000 paper in the American Journal of Physics, didn't just notice similarity. They explicitly suggested that plasma physics should be considered an integral part of biological investigation.
Really, integrating plasma physics into biology.
Yes. They highlighted how fundamental concepts in plasma physics, such as charge neutrality, Debye length, which describes the distance over which electric fields can extend in a plasma, and especially the double layer, are incredibly useful for explaining the electrical properties of a cellular membrane.
Okay, the double layer. Tell me more.
Even Hans Alfvén, another Nobel Prize winner in physics from 1970, and a giant in plasma physics, pointed out the striking similarities between these double layers, or plasma sheaths, that naturally occur in electrical plasma and the membranes of living cells.
He saw the connection too.
He explicitly stated in 1986 that a double layer is a plasma formation by which an electrical plasma protects itself from the environment. It is similar to a cell wall by which a biological plasma protects itself from the environment. So, for a theoretical plasma life form, this double layer would essentially act as a protective skin, a boundary that shields it from potentially harmful radiation or other environmental disturbances.
So a plasma sheath functions like a cell membrane. Tell us more about that profound analogy. It seems really key.
Think of a biological cell membrane. It's not just a bag. It's a dynamic, selectively permeable boundary. It marks the transition from the cytoplasm, the complex fluid inside the cell, to the external environment. Its primary role is to protect the cell's interior, maintaining a stable internal environment despite external fluctuations.
Right, homeostasis.
Exactly. Similarly, double layers or sheaves spontaneously form at the boundaries of an electrical plasma, or between two plasmas with different properties like density or temperature. This sheath provides the necessary closure and demarcation for minimal plasma cell systems to form, safeguarding their internal environment from the surrounding plasma.
And the comparison goes deeper.
It does. The cytoplasm in biological cells is a solution containing neutral molecules, positive and negative ions, making it macroscopically charged neutral. Electrical plasma, too, behaves macroscopically charged neutral, but is composed of free ions and electrons. Furthermore, plasma sheaths aren't just impermeable barriers. They contain channels that allow specific particles and energy to flow in and out.
Ah, like ion channels in our cells.
Precisely like the intricate ion channels in biological membranes that regulate what enters and leaves a cell. This allows for communication and metabolic processes. The structural and functional analogy is quite compelling.
That's a profound similarity, truly blurring the lines. But life isn't just about static structures, it's about information, about continuity, about memory. How could something as seemingly ephemeral as plasma possibly store information, let alone remember anything in a way that truly mimics biological memory?
That's an excellent question, and it brings us to another fascinating parallel. Hysteresis.
Hysteresis,
Yeah.
like in magnets.
Exactly like in magnets or computer hard drives.
Yeah.
Both electrical plasma bodies and biochemical cells exhibit this property. Hysteresis means that a system's state depends not just on its current input, but also on its history of past inputs.
Okay, so it has a memory of sorts.
To put it simply, yes. They retain alignment or a particular state even after an electric current or a field that induced that state is switched off. Think of it like a hard disk drive. Tiny magnetic domains align when written to, and then hold that alignment even when the power is off, which is the very basis of digital memory. So just like your computer remembers things after you close it, or a magnetic strip remembers your credit card number, plasma could retain a memory of its state or experiences, forming the basis for information storage and even primitive learning within these potential living systems.
This all sounds incredibly complex. Are we talking about any kind of plasma or a specific, more intricate type that allows for this kind of behavior?
We're primarily discussing what's known as complex or dusty non-thermal plasma. This distinction is critically important
Why dusty?
because while over 99% of the ordinary matter in the universe is in a plasma state, and dust is just as prevalent, complex plasmas offer a unique environment. When plasma is made of chemically active gases, tiny dust particles can actually form directly within the plasma through chemical processes, growing like crystals.
So the dust isn't just contamination, it's part of the system.
It's integral. Electrons, being tiny and highly mobile, easily stick to these dust particles, making them accumulate a large negative charge and become polarized. When sunlight hits them, they can even emit electrons, creating photoelectric effects.
Okay.
Unlike simpler plasmas, the charge on a dust grain in complex plasma isn't constant. It fluctuates with the local plasma potential and environment. This leads to incredibly intricate features and complex nonlinear dynamics,
Like what?
like the formation of stable vortexes, self-organizing filamentary currents, stunning helical structures, concentric shells, and those protective double layers we just discussed. So it's not just a chaotic soup. It's a highly structured, dynamic, and potentially self-organizing medium. The dust adds a whole new layer of complexity.
So it's a dynamic, highly structured environment. And speaking of structure in life, we always assume life needs water. Our entire understanding of biology is so tied to it. What does this theoretical framework say about water's role, or lack thereof, for plasma life?
This brings us to a very intriguing argument, often called the water is not magic proposition. Christopher McKay, a planetary scientist at NASA Ames, has openly questioned water's absolute necessity for life, suggesting that our Earth-centric view might be limiting.
He thinks we're too focused on water.
Possibly. Similarly, astrobiologist Dirk Schultzmakuch from Washington State University believes our reliance on water is purely coincidental to Earth's abundance. He states quite directly, life on Earth learned to work with water because it's the only liquid that is really abundant. I don't think there's anything magical about it.
So something else was common.
Life might have used that instead. The implication being if a different solvent were abundant, life might have evolved to utilize it.
So are there other solvents that could theoretically support life based on their chemical properties?
Absolutely. Scientists have pointed out that water's catalytic and solvent properties aren't entirely unique. For instance, hydrogen fluoride, sulfuric acid, ammonia, and hydrogen peroxide all share water's ability to carry hydrogen ions, which are crucial for catalyzing many chemical reactions, much like nutrient digestion in cells.
So you could have life based in, say, ammonia.
There are serious scientific arguments that oceans of sulfuric acid might work on a warmer planet, and oceans of methanol, ammonia, or even methane could suffice on cooler planets, all capable of supporting complex chemistry.
But for plasma life?
Right, for plasma life, it's a different story. Jay Alfred, the author of our source paper, highlighted back in 2008 that the importance of water is relative to biochemical life, which relies on chemical reactions in a solvent. For electromagnetic plasma-based life, water is completely unnecessary and irrelevant.
How so?
These plasma life forms would use magnetic fields to form their structures and electrical circuits in fields for transport and communication, making the need for a liquid solvent like water vanish entirely. Their biology operates on fundamentally different principles.
And it gets even more fascinating when we consider liquid crystal plasma as a potential substrate for life. That's a huge leap, but what's the advantage? Why might this be superior to water?
Indeed. In 1994, Gregor Morfill and his colleagues made a significant discovery. Complex or dusty plasmas can switch between a liquid and a crystalline state, much like the liquid crystals we see in our electronic displays.
Liquid crystals, like in my phone screen.
Exactly that kind of state.
Yeah.
These liquid crystals occupy an intermediate state between solid and liquid, where particles are free to move like a fluid but maintain a specific orientation, forming a crystalline-like order. They found that because of the strong electrical interactions between the dust particles, these liquid plasmas and plasma crystals could form.
Okay.
Another group, G. Gozadinos and colleagues, later confirmed this, noting that complex plasma can undergo these phase transitions and condense into these ordered states due to electrostatic interactions and electric field confinement. This means complex plasma can exist in a stable, structured, liquid crystal state, just like the cytoplasm within biochemical cells in our bodies.
But what's the advantage?
The key feature of liquid crystals is their tendency to reorient themselves very precisely when a voltage is applied. This, as the author suggests, could give the owner of the biological body control over the processes in the body through electromagnetic instructions and transactions.
Whoa, so it could literally change its internal structure on demand.
Imagine a living system that can literally reconfigure its internal structure or its entire form simply by manipulating its own internal electromagnetic fields. This unique capability makes complex plasma an ideal and potentially superior substrate for supporting life, especially one based on electromagnetic principles, offering a level of instantaneous control and adaptability far beyond what our biochemical bodies are capable of.
So what does this all mean for our definition of life? It's not just about what you're made of, but how you interact with your environment, how you maintain your form, and how you transmit information. It sounds much broader.
Precisely. To consider plasma as a viable substrate for life, we need a broad fundamental definition of life itself. Generally, life exhibits self-organization, meaning it creates and maintains order from disorder, building complex structures. It practices homeostasis, maintaining internal stability despite changing external conditions.
Metabolism, growth, reproduction.
Exactly. Metabolism, processing energy and matter. It undergoes growth, reproduction, and crucially, evolution, adapting and changing over generations.
And the key requirements.
For any form of life, carbon-based or otherwise, two crucial elements are necessary. First, a clear boundary, like a membrane or sheath or skin, to separate its internal environment from the external, allowing a selective passage of matter and energy. Second, within that boundary, there must be a mechanism for internal information storage and processing that facilitates the recreation of these structures and internal organization, generating a sense of self and enabling heredity.
Like genes, but not necessarily DNA.
Exactly, some form of inheritable information. This broad definition provides the theoretical framework for how plasma life forms could arise and evolve through a Darwinian evolutionary process, adapting to their unique environmental pressures.
That sets the stage beautifully. Now let's move from theory to something quite a bit more concrete. Let's look at some tangible examples, starting with ordinary plasma life forms that have actually been observed in laboratories. This sounds amazing.
This is truly captivating and a pivotal moment in understanding this concept. In 2003, a team of researchers, Arzilia Lozneanu and Mircea Sandălăvișu from the University of Alexandru Ioan Cuza in Romania, reported a remarkable experiment where they managed to generate plasma cells in the laboratory.
Plasma cells? In a lab? How?
Their method was surprisingly simple, yet the results were profound. They applied a high voltage to electrodes submerged in argon gas, which created an arc discharge essentially, a controlled tiny lightning strike. This process converted the neutral argon gas into a non-thermal, or cold plasma, at the positively charged electrode, the anode.
And what happened? Did they just get a discharge or something more organized? Like, did it just flash and disappear?
What happened next was astonishing.
Mm.
The plasma spontaneously organized itself into stable, luminous, nearly spherical gaseous bodies. Each sphere possessed a distinct double layer, functioning precisely like a biological cell membrane, with an outer layer of negatively charged electrons and an inner layer of positively charged ions.
Wow. Stable spheres. How big?
The size and lifespan of these spheres were directly determined by the energy in the induced spark, ranging from microscopic micrometers up to 3 centimeters in diameter, large enough to be seen with the naked eye. They were truly self-confined, stable, and maintained their spherical shape.
So they were essentially little plasma bubbles with a skin, but did they do anything that resembled life?
More than just bubbles. At a critical electrode potential, these cells didn't just stay put. They could actually detach from the electrode and float independently. And here's where it gets truly lifelike. After detaching, they were observed to replicate by splitting into two.
Splitting, like cell division.
Analogous to biological cells undergoing mitosis. They grew by taking in neutral argon atoms from their environment, ionizing them, and then using that ionized material to replenish and expand their boundary layers.
So they grew and replicated. What about metabolism?
The researchers described a rhythmic inhalation of the nucleus, mimicking breathing, which led to pulsations reminiscent of metabolic processes in living cells. Imagine tiny, glowing, self-contained entities pulsating and replicating right there in the lab.
That sounds incredibly similar to single-celled organisms. But you mentioned something even wilder, communication between them. How could that work?
Yes, Lozneanu described how these plasma cells could communicate with each other. They emitted electromagnetic energy at a specific frequency, and this energy could then be resonantly absorbed by other cells in their vicinity, causing them to vibrate at that same frequency.
Like tuning forks.
Kind of. He noted, quite provocatively, that this behavior would be described as telepathic if the underlying mechanism, the transmission and reception of electromagnetic waves, wasn't understood. It demonstrates a form of rudimentary information exchange between these systems.
So they're self-organizing, they replicate, they metabolize, and they communicate. That's a lot of the fundamental boxes checked for what we define as life.
It absolutely is. Lazarillo even suggested that these electrical plasma cells are, quote, potentially able to perform a further biochemical evolution into a living cell. He and his colleagues believe these plasmaspheres might have been the very first cells on Earth, emerging within the intense electric storms on the early hot Earth, where plasma was incredibly prevalent.
The origin of life itself, potentially?
Sandulevichu explicitly stated, the cell-like spheres we describe could be at the origin of other forms of life we have not yet considered. They truly behave like primitive organisms, like microbes, and our hesitation to call them life might just be our entrenched bias towards carbon-based biology, missing a much broader definition.
But there are crucial caveats, right? These experiments weren't under natural conditions as we understand them today. They needed that jolt of electricity.
That's a crucial point for context. The experiment specifically used electrical energy at room temperatures to create the necessary conditions for the plasma to form and organize. Naturally, argon gas only ionizes at extremely high temperatures, around 10,000 kelvins conditions found in stars, for example.
So unlikely to happen on Earth's surface now.
Highly unlikely today, yes. They required a non-thermal or cold plasma environment created by that arc discharge. This also implies that stellar cores, which are incredibly hot and chaotic, are unlikely to generate such delicate spheres.
But maybe elsewhere. Or earlier.
Possibly. Non-thermal plasma environments found elsewhere in the universe, like cosmic dust clouds where photoionization from stellar radiation occurs, could certainly be more promising candidates for natural occurrences of such primitive plasma life. Or, as they suggest, on the very early Earth.
And there are also disagreements about the implications of these findings, like from Grégoire Nicolas at the University of Brussels. He wasn't convinced.
Yes, Nicholas expressed skepticism, calling the view of these as true life forms, stretching the realms of possibility. He particularly questioned whether complex biomolecules like DNA could emerge at such high temperatures or within such energetic systems.
Which is a fair point if you assume life needs DNA as we know it.
Exactly. But this raises an important counter-question. Why must genomic structures be biochemical in the first place? Why couldn't other non-biochemical genomic structures arise in electrical plasma to carry hereditary information? The evidence suggests it might indeed be possible.
Which leads us to the fascinating, almost sci-fi concept of plasma DNA. This is where it gets really interesting. Plasma DNA. That sounds like something straight out of science fiction. How could something as ephemeral as plasma form a structure akin to our genetic material?
It certainly does sound like it, but it's rooted in serious scientific simulation. In 2007, a team led by V.N. Satovich of the Russian Academy of Science, along with collaborators like Gregor Morfil, utilized sophisticated computer models to simulate molecular dynamics.
And what did these simulations show?
What they discovered was truly revolutionary. Inorganic dust particles in plasma, under the right conditions, could spontaneously self-organize into helical structures that interact in ways strikingly similar to organic life.
Helical structures, like DNA's double helix.
Very much like it. Titovich went on record stating, these complex, self-organized plasma structures exhibit all the necessary properties to qualify them as candidates for inorganic living matter. They are autonomous, they reproduce, and they evolve.
So we're talking about inorganic matter behaving like DNA. How does that even work in a simulation? What are the mechanics?
The simulations suggested that in the gravity-free environment of space, a condition often found in interstellar dust clouds, plasma particles would bead together to form long, string-like filaments. These filaments would then naturally twist into helical strands that bear a remarkable resemblance to the double helix of DNA.
Okay.
What's more, these structures are electrically charged and attracted to each other, allowing them to interact. They exhibited properties like bifurcations, which could serve as memory marks or points for information storage. Crucially, they were shown to divide to form copies of the original structure, a form of reproduction.
Replication again.
Yes. And they could interact to induce changes in their neighbors, leading to the formation of new, varied structures. The simulations even showed that less stable structures would break down, demonstrating a form of natural selection, where more robust or adaptable forms persist.
Natural selection in plasma dust.
Stitovich concluded that these structures possess the fundamental properties needed for primitive, inorganic living matter if certain conditions for natural evolution are met, noting that the ionized conditions required are common throughout outer space.
This raises an important question. Are we seeing true genetic material, or a fascinating parallel phenomenon? The debate highlights the complexity of defining life outside our usual parameters, especially when it comes to the very blueprint of an organism. It's hard not to map our biology onto it.
That's the crux of it, and it requires us to consider some important nuances. Firstly, helical structures, including double helices, are incredibly ubiquitous in both laboratory and space plasma. They're not unique to these simulations. They can be explained by basic plasma dynamics involving magnetic fields.
So they pop up naturally anyway.
We see them in the intricate coronal streamers on the sun's surface and even in the vast swirling dust clouds of the Orion constellation. So while compelling, their helical shape alone might not uniquely signify a biological function as we understand it. It could just be physics.
Wow.
Secondly, Dzisovich's simulations primarily assumed a gravity-free environment. However, we know that many helical structures exist in magnetized plasmas with gravitational fields, suggesting gravity isn't necessarily a barrier to their formation. The crucial factors seem to be a sufficiently ionized environment immersed in a magnetic field.
Okay.
Thirdly, it's vital to remember these conclusions were based on numerical simulations. While powerful predictive tools, they are not direct real-world experiments, so empirical validation is still needed. We haven't seen this happen directly.
And what about the transmission of genetic information itself? Does it have to be a helical structure like DNA or RNA for a plasma life form? Could it be something else entirely?
Not necessarily. Our historical bias leads us to think of genetic information being transmitted biochemically, like through DNA's famous double helix. But if these plasma cells operate primarily within electrical and magnetic fields and manipulate electromagnetic waves for communication, the information could potentially be stored in other ways.
Such as?
For instance, it could be stored in structures exhibiting hysteresis, similar to how computer hard drives store information, or even transmitted via electromagnetic waves themselves, like a radio signal carrying complex data. Information doesn't have to be chemical.
Right.
However, it's also a compelling hypothesis that these helical plasma structures could certainly have acted as precursors or templates for early RNA on a hotter early Earth, guided by the prevalent electric and magnetic fields of that era.
So maybe not DNA itself, but a stepping stone.
Potentially. So whether or not it's plasma DNA in the strict sense, it provides a powerful model for information storage and replication in a non-carbon system.
So we're moving from a theoretical possibility and lab curiosities to considering them as fully fledged macro-unicellular plasma life forms. This is a big jump. Is there recent work supporting this?
It is a big jump, but it's supported by recent scientific thought. A very recent paper from 2024 by R. Joseph and colleagues, titled Extraterrestrial Life in the Thermosphere, Plasmas, UAP, Pre-Life, Fourth State of Matter, explicitly states that plasmas are electromagnetic entities that have cellular characteristics and display distinct behavioral patterns, and engage in behaviors similar to simple multicellular organisms.
Wow, that's quite direct.
It is. And this echoes what Jay Alfred noted almost 2 decades prior in 2005, drawing support from the observations of Uehara and Lozniana we discussed earlier.
What were those structural similarities again between the lab-created plasma cells and living eukaryotic cells, just to refresh?
The electrical plasma cells generated in the lab strikingly resemble living eukaryotic cells. They possess a distinct double layer or sheath, which is analogous to a cell's phospholipid bilayer membrane, that protective selective skin.
Right, the boundary.
They also appear to have a central nucleus or nucleoid region, similar to where genetic material is stored in biological cells, and even filaments that resemble a biological cell's cytoskeleton, providing internal support and facilitating movement.
So structurally, they look like basic cells.
Very much so.
Yeah.
This suggests that if plasma life forms exist, they would likely have generic structures strikingly similar to single-celled eukaryotic life forms we're familiar with, such as protozoans like amoebae and paramecia, which have defined nuclei and complex internal organization despite being single-celled.
If they're unicellular, does that imply they're primitive in terms of intelligence or capability? We tend to equate single-celled with simple.
Not at all, and that's a really important point. While plasma life forms might develop complexity as single-cell organisms, unlike the multicellular evolution of carbon-based life on Earth, this doesn't imply primitive intelligence or simplicity. The remarkable intelligence of amoebae and even slime mold, which famously lack brains or any centralized collection of neurons, has been repeatedly demonstrated in laboratories. These organisms can solve mazes, learn, and make complex decisions.
Right, the slime mold experiments are amazing.
Exactly. So single-cell life forms are incredibly successful,
Right.
having existed for 2 to 3 billion years, far longer than complex multicellular life. Microbiology is therefore highly relevant to understanding the potential capabilities of plasma life forms. For these entities, intelligence could be a decentralized, distributed property of the entire cell itself.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Imagine life that can live forever through replication, senses everything around it, and doesn't even need a brain to be intelligent. What about their sensory systems and metabolism? How would they perceive the world? That seems fundamentally alien.
As macro-unicellular life forms, plasma life forms would be expected to have decentralized and distributed sensory systems. This means they could sense stimuli from any part of their body, unlike us with our specialized organs like eyes and ears.
So sensing everywhere at once.
If they could perceive sound, they would hear from all directions simultaneously. If they could perceive light, they would see in all directions. More profoundly, because they would utilize entirely different cognitive sensory systems compared to our biochemical bodies, they would likely sense space and time in fundamentally different, perhaps alien ways.
How? Like sensing magnetic fields directly.
Imagine perceiving the universe not through light and sound, but through subtle shifts in electromagnetic fields or plasma currents. It's hard for us to even conceptualize. For metabolism, they are expected to absorb and metabolize various energetic particles from their ionized environment, as well as solar and electromagnetic radiation.
Like plants using sunlight.
Exactly. Strikingly similar to how photoautotrophs, like plants, use sunlight to produce energy for growth and evolution. So they could survive by capturing, storing, and utilizing ambient electromagnetic energy.
And replication. If they're like unicellular organisms, does that mean they're potentially immortal? You hinted at that.
In a fascinating sense, yes. Plasma life forms would replicate like many unicellular organisms through processes like symmetrical cell fusion, fission, or budding. If they undergo symmetrical binary fission, where a parent cell essentially produces two identical daughter cells, neither of which is the parent in the traditional sense.
Then the parent technically never dies.
Exactly. They could achieve biological immortality within geological timescales, barring external factors like disasters or predation. The parent effectively lives on as two younger, identical versions of itself, bypassing the aging and death process that asymmetrical fission or a multicellular complexity often entails.
But if it's asymmetrical,
Then, like some yeast cells, for example, it could indeed lead to aging and a natural death cycle for the parent line.
and the ability to form superorganisms, that sounds like a hive mind, but for single-celled entities. Is that plausible?
It does sound like that, and it's a concept deeply rooted in microbiology. Just like many unicellular biological organisms, plasma life forms would also be expected to form entosymbiotic relationships, where one life form lives inside another.
Like mitochondria in our cells.
Precisely. A process theorized to be fundamental to the evolution of our own eukaryotic cells from engulfed prokaryotes. And under certain environmental conditions, these plasma life forms, much like their biological counterparts such as slime molds, could temporarily congregate or aggregate to form superorganisms that function cohesively and resemble multicellular life, exhibiting coordinated behavior and even division of labor. It's truly a different scale and mode of organization than we typically imagine for intelligent life.
Okay, so we've got a compelling, albeit theoretical, case for what plasma life might be like, from its cellular structure to its replication and potential intelligence. Now, let's explore where it could thrive, or perhaps more accurately, where in our familiar universe it would truly struggle. What are the general habitability conditions needed for such exotic life? Is it like the Goldilocks zone for water?
Just like the rare Earth hypothesis suggests that conditions for complex carbon-based life are exceedingly rare, plasma life also needs very specific Goldilocks conditions. These include an acceptable range of temperatures, sufficient particle density for macroscopic bodies to form and interact, and crucially, overall environmental stability over long evolutionary timescales.
Stability seems key.
It's paramount. All three conditions must be met for complex plasma life forms to evolve and thrive beyond primitive, fleeting forms.
And what's the greatest challenge, the fundamental barrier for ordinary plasma life forms in our familiar universe? You mentioned it before.
The greatest challenge, by far, is the sheer, overwhelming strength of the electric charge in the ordinary matter universe. The electrical force between two electrons, for instance, is an astonishing 1,039 times stronger than their gravitational attraction. It's almost unimaginably strong.
Okay, and that causes problems.
While electric charges tend to cancel out at larger neutral scales, Locally, this immensely powerful charge leads to numerous violent plasma instabilities. Plasma life, especially complex forms, needs a stable, predictable environment for self-organization and evolution to occur.
Right. Evolution needs time and consistency.
Exactly. Evolution thrives in stability. Constant environmental change or a shifting goalpost makes natural selection and the accumulation of complex traits incredibly difficult, if not impossible.
So chaotic environments mean no complex life. Does that rule out stars and the sun, which are giant balls of plasma? Seems like the obvious place to look, but maybe not.
Generally, yes, for complex forms of life. Plasmas in stars and the sun are prone to extreme turbulence, violent nuclear fusion reactions, and grand-scale instabilities like solar flares, coronal mass ejections, and magnetic reconfigurations, which would constantly disrupt and incinerate any organized structure.
Total chaos.
Pretty much. This largely rules them out for harboring complex life, except perhaps for incredibly small, isolated, and highly transient pockets of proto- or primitive plasma life, if such extremely specific and contained conditions could exist in very specific patches. But it's a long shot.
So the lab experiments are kind of artificial in that sense.
The laboratory experiments we discussed, like Loznianu's, were conducted under highly controlled conditions using strong, stable electric fields, which are far removed from the chaotic, uncontrolled reality of most cosmic plasmas.
What specific instabilities are we talking about that would be so devastating to a plasma life form? Give us a clearer picture of the dangers.
Imagine trying to build a sandcastle on a beach during a hurricane. That's akin to plasma trying to form complex life in many cosmic environments. We're talking about turbulence that can tear apart organized structures and dissipate energy like a violent storm. There are also powerful waves and oscillations that can rapidly drain energy from localized systems, preventing them from maintaining internal stability. Then there are specific instabilities like kink or tearing modes. Imagine a thick rope twisting and snapping under immense tension, or a sheet of fabric ripping apart violently.
That doesn't sound good for a cell.
Not at all. That's what happens to a plasma form, violently collapsing it if it relies on magnetic fields for containment. The plasma also constantly emits radiation, which can cool it rapidly or damage delicate internal organization. And consider the Rayleigh-Taylor instability. Think of trying to build a stable structure out of oil sitting on top of water. It's inherently unstable, and the heavier fluid will inevitably displace the lighter one, tearing the plasma cloud apart.
So constant disruption.
These instabilities prevent steady-state operation, disrupting homeostasis, that crucial ability of life to maintain a stable internal environment. It means constant energy would be needed just to stabilize or recover from disruptions, lowering overall efficiency and making complex evolution prohibitively difficult. Even in relatively quieter, ordinary plasma dust clouds, the high strength of the electric charge and dynamic environments make them susceptible to electron or ion capture, ion drag, and external electric fields that can trigger filamentation and void formation, literally shredding clouds apart.
So if ordinary plasma life were to evolve, it would essentially need to actively fight against its environment every single moment just to exist. It sounds exhausting.
Exactly. It would need to evolve incredibly specific and energy-intensive mechanisms just to stabilize its environment and maintain its integrity. This volatility means even small instabilities pose significant, often insurmountable challenges to developing complex life.
And what about charge separation, which is so fundamental to our biochemical systems? Our cells are all about maintaining electrical gradients across membranes. How does plasma handle that?
This is another critical hurdle in the ordinary matter universe. Biochemical life relies on distinct pockets of non-neutral charge carriers, like ions, embedded within predominantly neutral matter, with charges separated by hydrodynamic forces in membranes. Ordinary plasma, however, is fundamentally different.
How so?
It's predominantly composed of free charged particles, ions, and electrons, with only some neutrals. In our universe, charged particles vastly outnumber neutrals, typically at a ratio of about 14 charged particles to 1 neutral particle.
So mostly charged stuff.
Right. This is in stark contrast to theoretical dark plasma, which we'll get to, where neutral or pseudo-neutral particles actually significantly outnumber charged particles at a ratio of maybe 1 neutral to 5.5 charged. This means ordinary plasma has a strong natural tendency not to tolerate sustained charge separation. Any charge separation quickly dissipates or is neutralized.
So it can't maintain those gradients easily.
Exactly. Without continuous stable charge separation, many complex bioplasma activities, like generating electrical potentials for communication or driving metabolic processes, which are absolutely needed for intelligent plasma life, would only be possible in very isolated, extremely controlled places, perhaps incidentally interpenetrating atomic-based life.
So the conclusion for complex ordinary plasma life forms in our universe is pretty bleak then. It seems unlikely on a grand scale.
Unfortunately, yes. Based on these challenges, they're not expected to be widespread in complex forms. They would mostly exist as proto or primitive organisms, perhaps fleetingly.
But maybe they had a role early on.
That's a fascinating and provocative hypothesis, that these primitive ordinary plasma life forms may have actually served as templates for the formation of carbon-based life forms. In this view, instead of continuing to evolve as complex plasma life in the ordinary matter universe, they essentially laid the groundwork and perhaps even transitioned into carbon-based life as conditions on early Earth shifted.
Templates. Like scaffolding that got replaced.
Something like that, yes. An intriguing possibility.
Okay, let's quickly review habitability in specific ordinary matter environments given these challenges. The universe at large is 99% plasma, but you're saying that's still not enough for complex life.
While the sheer abundance of plasma fulfills the temperature requirement in many regions, most of these environments lack sufficient stability or particle density for complex plasma life forms. So it's largely challenging. Our own solar system, from comets' tails to planetary magnetospheres and ionospheres, contains complex, dusty plasma.
Even here.
Yes. Priscilla Frisch, a prominent astrophysicist, calculates that our solar system has actually been sitting inside a low-density interstellar plasma dust cloud for the last 2,000 to 8,000 years, a period that coincides with the dawn of human civilization. These dust clouds are certainly more conducive than stars, but they still suffer from various plasma instabilities, making complex ordinary matter plasma life rare and transient within them.
And the sun is definitely out.
The sun and stars, as we discussed, are generally inhospitable due to extreme nuclear fusion and explosive activity, although proto-life might exist in fleeting, isolated pockets.
What about closer to home, the plasma environments between the moon and Earth? You mentioned the Kordylowski clouds.
Ah, yes. The Kordylowski plasma dust clouds, which reside at the Earth-Moon system's L4 and L5 Lagrange points, gravitationally stable points in space. These are enormous, estimated to be about 105,000 kilometers by 72,000 kilometers, nearly 9 times wider than Earth. They are incredibly faint, diffuse concentrations of micrometer-sized dust particles.
Stable points, but stable clouds.
Not really. While particles get temporarily trapped here, they're constantly buffeted by solar and cosmic rays, perturbed by the sun's gravity, and, critically, still subject to plasma instabilities and struggle to sustain charge separation. So while intriguing, only simple proto or primitive forms could exist there, complex, evolving forms couldn't arise due to severe lack of long-term stability. It's like trying to build a stable ecosystem in a constantly agitated whirlpool.
Okay. And Earth's own atmosphere and near-Earth space. The plasmasphere, ionosphere, magnetosphere, these are full of plasma. Seems like a possibility.
These environments, including the Van Allen belts and orbiting plasma dust clouds, certainly contain complex non-thermal plasma, kept ionized by solar wind, UV, X-ray, and cosmic rays through photoionization. However, stability is once again the insurmountable issue.
Still too chaotic.
Earth's magnetic poles reverse periodically, and the entire magnetosphere is constantly buffeted by solar wind and cosmic rays. Even beautiful phenomena like noctilucent clouds, which are cold plasma dust clouds in the mesosphere, are incredibly short-lived, appearing and vanishing within hours. This fundamental lack of long-term stability and persistence makes it extremely challenging for complex ordinary matter plasma life to exist or evolve in these regions. Any complex organization would be constantly forming and then being ripped apart.
This raises an important question. If ordinary matter plasma is so inherently unstable and hostile for complex life, how could it ever emerge? This is where the concept of dark matter biospheres becomes critically important. But before we get there, what about the Earth's crust, mantle, and core? That's dense, but also has some extreme conditions. Could life hide there?
The Earth's crust is simply hostile to plasma life, as we've defined it. It's a weakly ionized, cold, and incredibly dense rocky surface where natural plasma, if it forms at all, dissipates almost instantly unless artificially confined.
Why does density hurt it?
The high density, strong electric charge, and low temperature cause charged particles to rapidly recombine into neutral atoms. Earth's magnetic fields, while crucial for trapping charged particles to create the plasmasphere high above us, peter out significantly at lower altitudes and are far too weak to sustain a natural layer of non-thermal plasma on the surface.
So no surface plasma life today.
Proto or primitive plasma life may have thrived in the early molten Earth, when conditions were very different. But as Earth cooled and became denser, most would have become extinct on the surface. They can also be easily destroyed by physical means like nuclear blasts or even the vacuum of space, which causes them to dissipate.
And going deeper into the mantle and core, hotter but more pressure.
Exactly. As you go deeper into the Earth, temperature certainly rises, allowing for some ionization of matter. However, pressure also dramatically increases. This immense pressure actively suppresses the formation and sustenance of plasma bodies.
Too much pressure.
While even greater pressure, like that found in neutron stars, could theoretically form plasma, Earth's mantle and core pressures are orders of magnitude lower than neutron stars, yet still too high compared to the conditions required for complex plasma life to thrive. So, for complex plasma life forms, we really need to shift our gaze.
To the dark side.
To Earth-theorized dark plasma spheres, yes, where the fundamental rules of interaction are different.
So, the ordinary matter universe, even with all its plasma, seems to be a tough neighborhood for complex plasma life. But this is where it gets really mind-bending. Let's talk about the theoretical basis for dark matter life. Are leading scientists really predicting this? This isn't just fringe speculation?
They absolutely are, and it's not a fringe idea, but a rapidly developing area of thought within cutting-edge physics and astrophysics. Leading scientists are not only not dismissing the possibility of dark matter life forms, some are actively predicting it.
Like who?
Theoretical physicist Lisa Randall from Harvard, a prominent figure in particle physics, in her 2015 and 2016 work stated, if one variety of dark matter can clump together, it could form a panoply of previously unimagined dark structures, even allow the existence of dark life. That's a direct quote from a respected physicist.
Dark life, wow.
Sean Carroll from Caltech, another leading theoretical physicist and cosmologist, imagined this even earlier, back in 2008 and 2013, pondering, what if you had two different types of stable particles that carry dark charge? Then we would be able to make dark atoms and could start writing papers on dark chemistry. You know that dark biology is not far behind.
Dark chemistry. Dark biology.
He's even explored the concept of dark photons and a new dark force resembling ordinary electromagnetism, but crucially, with a significantly weaker charge.
And there's also the idea of charged dark matter particles, right? That's not just a hypothetical floating around.
Exactly. Julian Munoz and Avi Loeb from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics in 2018 specifically explored the possibility of charged dark matter particles having a very weak electrical charge, as tiny as 1/1,000,000th of an electron. It's a scientifically testable hypothesis.
And Alfred, our source author, was thinking along these lines too.
Interestingly, yes. Jay Alfred had already made similar proposals in his 2005 book on dark plasma and electromagnetism, and his 2009 paper, Creation of Minimal Plasma Cell Systems by Self-Organization in Earth's Dark Biosphere, Leading to the Evolution of Dark Plasma Life Forms, specifically predicted the existence of terrestrial dark plasma life forms.
Terrestrial dark plasma life. Okay, just to be clear though, what do we mean by dark plasma?
It's important to clarify, dark plasma here refers to plasma made of dark matter particles, not ordinary matter that's somehow in a dark mode or invisible state. We are talking about a completely different fundamental type of matter interacting via potentially different forces.
So we're talking about an entirely different rule book for physics, where dark matter isn't just an invisible, mysterious component of the universe. It's potentially alive and right here on Earth. But what makes it a better habitat for complex life than ordinary plasma? What's the game changer? Why is it potentially stable?
The game changer is the fundamental suppression of plasma instabilities in the dark sectors. The key factor is that weaker electric charge we mentioned.
The charge is weaker. How much weaker?
The electric charge within the dark sector is estimated to be anywhere from 100 to 1,000,000 times weaker than the electric charge in the ordinary sector. Even being 1,000,000 times weaker, it would still be 10 and 30 times stronger than gravitational attraction. So it's still a powerful force, just less overwhelming.
Okay, 100 to 1,000,000 times weaker. How does that weaker charge make it so much more stable for life? What does that stability actually look like?
In the ordinary universe, phenomena like plasma turbulence, explosive filamentation, and violent kink instabilities, those tearing and snapping forces we discussed, depend on incredibly strong, chaotic field interactions. Weakening the electric force by orders of magnitude would allow for much more linear and laminar behavior.
So calmer, less violent.
Imagine a calm, flowing river instead of a raging, unpredictable storm. This means plasma structures could organize over much larger regions, making them more diffuse but significantly more stable and persistent over time. So dark planets, which are essentially vast dark plasmaspheres, would be much larger and less prone to violent disruption.
What about things like stars? Would dark matter stars be different?
Fusion reactions, which make ordinary stars so chaotic, would also be largely suppressed, leading to ionized gases that are far less energetic and destructive than what we see in ordinary stars.
So instead of wild, violent turbulence, what would this dark plasma ocean actually look like? More ordered.
Instead of the explosive chaos of ordinary cosmic plasmas, the ionized particles in a dark plasma environment would still interact through magnetic fields and electrical potentials, but without the high-speed, disruptive instabilities and sudden eruptions we associate with solar flares. Instead, ionized particles might settle into vast, stable crystalline grids and concentric shells.
Crystalline grids. That sounds very organized.
You'd find gentle, persistent helical structures and diffuse filaments. Stable clouds of low-energy plasma could form vast, diffuse star-like objects with diffused light, shimmering rather than wildly radiating, like a gentle bioluminescent deep-sea current.
And what about charge separation? That was a big problem for ordinary plasma.
This profound stability, coupled with the crucial fact that dark plasma is predominantly neutral or pseudo-neutral, with only some charged particles. The reverse of ordinary plasma, where charged particles outnumber neutrals 14-1, allows for sustained charge separation.
That's a critical difference. Sustained charge separation is fundamental for our biology. How does it work there?
It truly is. Think of it like this. In our familiar biology, we need complex cell membranes to actively create and maintain separate electrical charges across tiny distances, which is vital for all cellular processes, from nerve impulses to metabolism. But in this dark plasma, with its incredibly stable, weaker electrical force, sustained charge separation happens naturally across vastly larger scales, like vast electrical oceans, where positive and negative regions can persist without rapidly neutralizing.
So the environment itself supports it.
Exactly. This removes a fundamental barrier that our carbon-based life had to evolve incredibly complex mechanisms to overcome, making truly sophisticated, complex, dark plasma life not just possible, but inherently easier to achieve.
Are there other factors helping stability?
Yes. Other contributing factors include shielding by abundant neutral particles, a generally higher background temperature in the dark universe, which aids ionization in a stable way, lower particle density, and the slower movement of dark matter particles, all contributing to a more placid environment for organization.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the stability afforded by a weaker electric charge fundamentally changes the conditions for life, moving from sporadic, primitive forms in our universe to potentially vast and complex biospheres within the dark sector. So tell us about these dark Earths. What are they?
These dark Earths are theorized as vast, interpenetrating, wholly dark plasmaspheres. Jay Alfred has described their origin, structure, and dynamics in other papers, and they offer a wide range of depths and heights where complex dark plasma life forms could thrive.
Interpenetrating, so occupying the same space as our Earth.
Essentially, yes. A significant advantage they possess is their coupling with the ordinary matter Earth. Instead of being isolated plasma clouds that could drift away or be torn apart in the vastness of space, these dark Earths gain additional stability from their association with our planet, effectively using Earth's gravitational field as a stable anchor, a sort of cosmic scaffolding.
And they would have had a huge evolutionary head start compared to us, wouldn't they? Since they didn't need Earth to cool down first.
Absolutely. Dark plasma life forms wouldn't have needed to wait for Earth's crust to cool down and for liquid water to accumulate, unlike carbon-based life. They would have had the full 4.5 billion years of Earth's existence to evolve, perhaps even longer if their formation predates our planet's.
Which means
Consequently, they are likely to vastly outnumber ordinary plasma-based and carbon-based life forms by many thousand folds on Earth and in the solar system, a truly staggering numerical advantage, if this theory holds true.
So we're talking about a completely different scale of existence. We might be living in just a tiny, thin pocket of life, while an entire civilization, perhaps civilizations, of plasma beings floats all around and through us unnoticed. How does our familiar carbon-based biosphere compare to this vast, invisible, dark plasma biosphere? Give us the numbers again.
The comparison is truly staggering, almost humbling. Our ordinary carbon-based biosphere, the one we're familiar with, consists of two incredibly thin shells. One is about 10 kilometers thick above the Earth's surface, hosting most of the life we know, including all of humanity. The other is about 10 kilometers thick below the surface, home to deep subsurface microbes and other extremophiles. so a total of approximately 20 kilometers thick.
Okay, 20 kilometers total habitable zone for us.
And think about humanity's tiny footprint within that. The human biosphere occupies less than a 10-kilometer layer above land, which itself is only 30% of the Earth's total surface. According to a 2009 World Bank report, 95% of the global population is concentrated in just 10% of that land surface. When you do the math, humans occupy an incredibly minuscule fraction less than a tiny 0.03% of the total volume of the ordinary matter Earth.
0.03%, that's almost nothing.
It's a fleeting whisper in the grand scheme.
That puts things in a truly humbling perspective. Now contrast that with the dark plasma biosphere that's theoretically interpenetrating our world. How big could it be?
The dark Earths are composed of non-thermal, complex, or dusty dark plasma, where neutral dark matter particles essentially act like the dust in our own complex plasmas. The relationship is similar to Jupiter's vast gas envelope compared to its comparatively small rocky core.
Okay.
The smallest dark Earth, theorized to be interpenetrating our visible Earth, could fit over 1,000 visible Earths inside itself.
1,000 Earths, inside something occupying our space.
Its diameter would be at least 11 times Earth's diameter, so roughly 70,000 kilometers compared to our 6,400-kilometer diameter. And since dark plasmaspheres can stretch vast distances, much like Earth's magnetosphere extends far into space, the actual ratio could be many times larger, creating a truly immense volume for life.
So our 0.03% compared to that.
To put it into our tiny human scale, our entire human biosphere, that minuscule 0.03% slice of our planet, occupies only about 0.00000% of the volume of just the smallest dark plasmasphere. It's an incomprehensibly vast scale of existence right here in our own backyard.
That's almost impossible to grasp. Where within this dark plasma ocean would life be most concentrated? If it's everywhere, is there a prime habitat zone?
While the dark biosphere is indeed sparsely populated overall, even with potentially trillions of plasma life forms, the highest density of dark plasma life forms is conjectured to inhabit a specific region. This region is about 100 kilometers thick, approximately 50 kilometers above, and 50 kilometers below the Earth's crust surface.
Why there?
This CTS region, encompassing Earth's crust, troposphere, and stratosphere, is significant because it coincides with where the neutral particle density is highest in the dark plasmasphere. This increased neutral particle density acts like a sort of scaffolding, providing more opportunities for the charged dark matter particles to interact and form complex structures, making it the most likely habitable zone for these entities.
So instead of walking on a surface, they're swimming through the air or even the ground. How would they live?
Precisely. Just like Jupiter's gas envelope, the dark Earth's larger dark plasma halo wouldn't have any hard surface to walk on. So dark plasma life forms would essentially float and move in an expansive plasma ocean or atmosphere of tenuous dark plasma.
What would it be like for them?
Imagine them existing in a perpetual twilight, with diffused light all around as plasma naturally emits photons. They wouldn't need to walk or run. Instead, their movement would be akin to flying and swimming slowly, traversing this vast ethereal environment.
But could they move fast?
However, due to their electromagnetic nature, they could also potentially zip through at enormous speeds, using various methods of propulsion and interaction with electromagnetic fields.
Are there barriers? Or can they go anywhere?
Occasionally, their movement could be abruptly stopped by what might be described as electrical fences, which are current-carrying double layers around other plasma cells or shells with different properties. If their energy levels are too low, they wouldn't be able to penetrate these powerful electromagnetic barriers that confine plasma with different densities, temperatures, and other properties, effectively creating boundaries and territories within their vast ocean.
Wow. Okay. So this deep dive fundamentally expands the scope of astrobiology. It pushes us to consider that life might not just be out there, somewhere across the galaxy, but also in here, in forms we've never dared to imagine, right under our noses, or rather, all around and through us.
Indeed. It forces us to confront our anthropocentric and carbon-centric biases. It opens up entirely new avenues for understanding biological evolution and diversity, not just on other planets, but potentially on our very own. It's about recognizing that the universe and our own planet might be far more teeming with life than we ever thought possible, just not in a form we can easily perceive.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The final thought to leave people with. If these telepathic, biologically immortal plasma life forms are zipping through the very air we breathe and the ground beneath our feet, perceiving space and time in ways totally alien to us, vastly outnumbering us, and potentially having superior cognitive sensory systems due to their electromagnetic nature, what does that mean for our understanding of intelligent life on Earth?
It challenges the very notion that we're the only ones, doesn't it?
Are we truly the only intelligent species on this planet, or merely the only one operating on a carbon-based visible spectrum that interacts with our limited senses? Could some of the unexplained phenomena that have puzzled humanity for centuries, from unusual atmospheric observations to unidentifiable movements, simply be instances of these highly mobile, invisible entities interacting with our world in ways we don't yet comprehend?
It's a provocative thought, certainly.
Hmm.
It reframes those mysteries in a potentially biological context, albeit an exotic one.
Perhaps the greatest frontier for discovery isn't across the galaxy, but just beyond our limited senses, right here at home. What might we be missing? And what might they think of us?